All right, welcome everybody to the Parish Council meeting. As you see, we've got a packed agenda tonight, so hopefully we can get through it as quickly as possible. So just start with item number 1, so apologies for absence.
Well, there aren't any councillors, obviously, but I've not heard from Kate Parkinson. I understand that the police rep, John Millman, was at the parish meeting, so obviously he's not coming here as well. So that's not good.
Okay, so we'll move on to procedural methods. So, election of a vice-chairperson. So the last meeting it was discussed about possibly electing a vice-chairperson, and I think I was given the opportunity to put some input in, so I think in view of the amount of work that we have to do as a parish council, having a vice-chairperson would be, I think, a good idea.
Yeah, I need a proposal.
So,
I propose Chris.
okay.
And
So
second.
a second. That's, yeah. Votes for? Sorry, Henry. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
6 for. Any against? One against. Any abstaining? Somebody must have abstained. That's miscounted. 1 against. 7 for. Can I have votes for again?
Well, Chris isn't voting.
Okay.
Okay, next item, to approve and authorise the minutes of the previous meeting.
Yeah, in fact, it's the two meetings, the annual meeting first, and then on the back, yeah, sorry, just to clarify. And then there's the council meeting which followed.
So the first was the annual meeting.
The annual meeting, yeah.
Anyone got any comments on that?
Are there any corrections?
At the top where it says attendees, you put night.
That's my fault.
Same day as well.
Who'd have thought it?
You've done it right, further down.
Anything else, any other corrections?
Just one on the, although I was on the meeting, I did watch the video. There's only 6 votes recorded and there were 7 people.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
As chair, I didn't vote.
Okay, so the video appeared to be good, but
So 4, still 4. Stays at 4. Okay, do we want to do matters arising from the annual meeting, and then we'll move on to the council meeting?
You do.
Any matters arising from the annual meeting? And going on to the council meeting, then, are they correct? Or are there any corrections? Any other corrections, or are they acceptable? Right. Can I have a vote for accepting both sets of minutes then, please? Everybody in agreement?
Abstain, Jack. I only got
I wasn't here.
Okay, so the matters are, we've already done matters arising from the annual meeting. Do matters arising from the council meeting. The one I would mention is item 5, the programme of meeting, because according to the minutes, and of course I wasn't here, it was agreed that they be considered provisional, and they would be reconsidered at this meeting, but they didn't go on this meeting's agenda. So I don't know whether you want to make any variations, any thoughts to make any variations in that programme. Or if there might be, then I'd suggest we just agree today, the date of the July meeting, and put it on the agenda, the programme on the agenda for the July meeting.
Okay. I mean, I'd propose that we move it to the July meeting.
But the July meeting is on the 4th, first Tuesday,
Yeah.
as usual. And it's down as a council surgery at 7 o'clock. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Can you sign? Sign. And then sign there. You can initial that page. And I'll change those to nights. If you can initial those two. And do the same on the front sheet. And I see Councillor Parkinson's arrived.
Evening. Okay, so next item on the agenda is declaration.
Declaration of interests, if there are any.
I can't remember what the item is, the warm welcome. 9-3.
Yeah, I mean, in my view, that doesn't affect your ability to discuss it as part of the discussion.
Yes, but when it comes to a vote or anything now.
It doesn't affect you personally, does it?
It's not financial, is it?
It's not financial.
It's not financial.
It doesn't bear on you more than it bears on any other member of the community, really.
Oh yeah, I did declare interest in the same event. I am sponsoring announcing of that event.
It's not complicated.
Supposed to over declare.
Okay. Yeah.
Now we're on to the public forum where people are allowed to make comment if they wish. Anything left over that we haven't discussed at the parish meeting that you want to discuss? Okay. Thank you very much. So we'll save some time. We'll move on. Report from the police.
Yeah, there's no police representative. I've not had anything, so that's just a nil. I think.
I mean,
Didn't you give us some feedback, didn't you?
Yeah.
Came up with the 18 incidents or
yeah.
something.
So we have a report from the
Yeah, I think he probably. Well, I don't know.
the previous.
Yeah, he should have been here rather than the parish meeting. So, but never mind.
Okay. No, we just make a note they did report the parish meeting and not be in the parish meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
Councillor Parkinson.
So, what I have for you, we have a curbside pothole on Frog Lane. So that has been reported again, which thank you actually for the photos. I thought they were very good, to be honest. So that's one that has been put forward. Hopefully you will get.
It's now started, we think.
That's it.
Well, they've closed the road.
They've closed the road.
They have. They've half
That's great.
constructed the culvert underneath.
I didn't actually go down before I came here, I just went straight here.
Yeah.
So the repainting of the yellow lines, that has been reported over and over again. And Cheshire East Highways, which I'm sorry to report, do not deem this high on the priority list of Cheshire East issues. All I can do is keep asking for that to be reassessed, but it is the same for all highways matters at the moment. Unfortunately, there is a lack of money in the pot, and it seems that the current administration are not keen on spending in rural areas, but they'll only spend on highly populated service towns such as Crewe or Macclesfield or Congleton, we are not deemed a priority, which is the bane of our life. So we do have the MTFS coming out. For you that don't understand what that means, it's the medium-term financial strategy. It was agreed upon not by me or many of my councillors in February this year, but we haven't had the highways budget through yet. So that will mean that we will only get proportionality of funding. So what happened recently was we had councillor budgets which equated to 4,200 per councillor per ward, which is nothing, absolutely nothing to spend money on. Now, if it's a grass skirt ward, which means there's more than one councillor, it means you get double the budget. This used to be a 3 councillor ward, so you can imagine the miles of highway we have throughout here. It needs a lot more spending on it, and it has changed from something which we had, for your information, called the Area Highways Group Meeting, where we could bid for money, and there used to be pots of money left over, and this was back in, say, 2019 through to 2020, where at one point there was £50,000 in the budget, where all the people in the north, because it was Northern Territory, we could bid for that money, and we all sat around as councillors, and we said, would you mind if we had this for our area? Or would you mind if we had this for our area? And it was distributed according to needs, and everyone worked together. Now it's a completely different kettle of fish. Since the new administration, which came in 2019, they only could change those policies back in probably mid-2000, 2001. So unfortunately, we are stuck in a position where we don't have the funding. And it is a shame to say, so all I can keep doing is reporting this, and just trying to get as much as we can. I have had some success in areas. We managed to get Stool Lane done, which God knows how we managed to get level 3 patchwork done, but we did. But we seem to have had the allocation for a bit, and it's a sad business. And it's the bane of our lives, unfortunately, as councillors, because we'd like to do more, but we can't. But we can keep trying, and that's the only thing I can give you there, so I do apologise, there's not more we can get out.
Okay, thank you.
On finance. Right, 7.0, financial risk assessment is one of several stages dealing with the annual accounts for the council for the last financial year up to the end of March. One of the things that councils are required to do is to make sure they carry out an assessment of financial risks. And so this has been done in tabular form for the last 3 or 4 years now. So there's an appendix attached with a table which lists a series of potential risks in relation to various aspects of the financial setup of the council, assessment of the risks, and some comments as to the adequacy of existing procedures. And the typing in black is what was approved by the council this time last year. There are 1 or 2 items added in red, and these have arisen from the annual accounts going before the internal auditor in the last 3 or 4 weeks. As I mentioned in the report, it's a new internal auditor because the previous one who internally audited the accounts for the last, I think, 18 years decided that she'd quite like a rest and gave up. So it's a new guy, it's a new accountancy practice essentially, and he's looked at everything very assiduously and has come up with 4 particular recommendations. The first one is insufficient control of hire income, and there the issue was that's because we're a small parish, small village hall, not a lot of bookings. The bookings that there are at the moment, particularly post-COVID, the 2 regular bookings were Zumba twice a week, Zumba classes, and a table tennis group once a week. The table tennis group's now folded, so that problem's gone away. But the Zumba groups, Alison Billani, I'm sure people know, she runs the groups most Mondays, most Thursdays, but occasionally she doesn't either because she's unavailable or unwell or something crops up. So in a sense I leave it to Alison, and I trust Alison to transfer the appropriate rental at £6 an hour for the hours that the group uses the hall. And that works quite well. Every month there's a payment into the bank account. The auditor thought, I suppose, correctly, that really we ought to be providing an invoice against those payments, which can be done. It's just another job for the clerk, essentially, and all these little jobs all add up. So that was one suggestion. I've suggested in relation to that we ought to think about how that could be organised. There is a system under the council's accounting software for bookings, and you can tie bookings to issue of invoices and the payments. But it's really all very complicated for the amount of bookings we have. But it's probably worth looking at that system again, whether we can do it in an easier way. So that's probably worth looking at to tackle that particular issue. The bigger invoices, I must say, when I get a bigger booking, like for instance, a couple of times a year these days there's a puppet theatre based in Knutsford who come and rehearse here, and they book it for the whole week during the day, Monday to Friday more or less, and I invoice them. When Cheshire East use the hall for council elections, I invoice them. So invoices do go out for substantial sums to commercial enterprises. It's the small bits and pieces that I've been less careful with. So that's that one.
So when you do the big invoices, do they have a sequential number?
No, they don't have a sequential number, so that would be organised. I just do an invoice and date it and keep a record of it. So they're not sequential. Going down that page, under misuse of funds, there's a thing about bank signatories, which is on the agenda, so we can come back to it later on in the meeting. And then at the end, in terms of procurement, under risk of supplier fraud, the auditor recommended that there be controls to minimise risks. In a sense, I'm not quite sure what that means, so I suggest that it's worth talking to Chalk to see what they would recommend as a means of doing that kind of job in relation to the size of this parish council. I am not a very big council, so I suggest that's done. And then on an audit trail for contract procurement. Again, that's a more formal version of a system when we're sending out quotations or asking for quotations for jobs to be done, replacing the windows in the village hall. The auditor's suggesting that there ought to be a specific audit trail of who gets sent the quotations, recording when they went out, when they came back, and all that kind of thing. Which again can be done. It's another job. That's all. So I suggest that the council thinks about how it might want to deal with that. So if you're happy with that schedule with those comments, if I can ask you to approve the assessment of financial risks, or make whatever amendments you agree, and then we can council.
Yep. Oppose it.
Agree with the second? Yeah. And votes for? Any against? Okay. Thank you.
Didn't get to know what to say. Got an hour ago.
7.1, the annual governance provisions. Parish council accounts are very odd, very strange things. There's a way of doing stuff, and it's all set out in statute and in regulations. There's no room for manoeuvre, and you have to go through a series of processes to get the accounts formally approved and then audited. In the report, I've detailed what the auditor said, and also one of the appendices is his detailed response. So some of the things I've commented already on. And then if we move on to what you have to approve. The first form has to be submitted to the external auditor, which has to be sent to him before 1st of July. First thing is the internal audit report, which is Appendix 7.1a, which is that thing which the internal auditor signed, and he's ticked every box and just commented that in relation to that comment about invoicing for higher fees, everything's satisfactory. So that's okay, you don't have to do anything with that. Moving on next to Appendix... Sorry, it's paper. Appendix 7.1c. These forms have to be taken in order, or else the system doesn't work. The Appendix 7.1c is headed Annual Government Statement 2022-23. I and the Chair have to sign this on your behalf, but you have to agree these various statements, or else say why we don't agree with them. So if I just run down them, you can follow, and then I'll ask for a yes or a no each time, please. So number one, we, that is the Council, have put in place arrangements for effective financial management during the year and for the preparation of accounting statements. While I believe we have, the internal auditor, I think, believes we have suitable systems as well. So I hope that will get a yes for everybody. Maybe I'll just ask for the votes at the end, and if anybody wants to say no against any particular item, they can do. 2, we maintained an adequate system of internal control, including measures designed to prevent and detect fraud and corruption, and reviewed its effectiveness. And again, that's reflected in the risk table that you've just seen. 3, we took all reasonable steps to assure ourselves that there are no matters of actual or potential non-compliance with laws, regulations and proper practices that could have a significant financial effect on the ability of the authority to conduct its business or manage its finances. 4, we provided proper opportunity during the year for the exercise of the electors' rights in accordance with the requirements of the accounts regs. The exercise of electors' rights is the period that will follow once the accounts are submitted to the external auditor. Simultaneously, the clerk has to put notices on the boards and on the website announcing that the accounts and invoices and receipts are available for public inspection within a period of 30 working days, and that has to be formally done. So that's that one, providing for the exercise of electors' rights. 5, we carried out an assessment of the risks facing the authority and took appropriate steps to manage those risks, including the introduction of internal controls and/or external insurance cover where required. Again, that comes back to the assessment of risks you just considered. 6, we maintained throughout the year an adequate and effective system of internal audit of the accounting records and control systems. The accounting records are all kept on purpose-designed accountancy software, specifically designed for parish councils. One of the steps in that is to produce monthly bank reconciliations, which I have done, and which your chair has just signed for the month just gone past, where one balances the invoices and payments and receipts that go through the books, balance that with what the bank statements are showing, and if the two balance, that's all hunky-dory. So I think that's adequate. We took appropriate action on all matters raised in reports from internal and external audit. So yes, if we respond to the comments that the internal auditor made, we will be doing that. 8, we considered whether any litigation, liabilities or commitments, events or transactions occurring either during or after the year end have a financial impact on the authority. There aren't any that I'm aware of. And then number 9 is not applicable to us in any case. So if anyone's in disagreement with any of those statements, I suppose, would they like to say so? We can have a discussion about it. Otherwise, can I ask for agreement to be ticking those boxes? Please, can I have a proposer? Proposer?
Yeah.
Seconder? And votes for? Any against? Any abstentions? So we sign those afterwards. Those out. Done. The next table to look at is the accounting statement, which is item 7.1D. And again, this is produced in the way that is required. What it shows in the two columns, there's a column, first column is the end of March, year to the end of March 2022, and then the end of March 2023, so you can compare one with the other. And I've made the odd comment in my report that total receipts for 22-23 were about £22,000, total payments were £37,500, and those are broken down into those sums there. As a kind of continuation of that, what the auditors also require is an explanation of variances. So then, if you look at Appendix 7.1E, explanation of variances, where there is a significant difference between what happened in the previous financial year and what happened in the financial year just gone, you have to explain why there was that change. So you can see in the explanation of variances table where I've gone down, so box 3, which is total other receipts, that's all receipts apart from the precept, they reduced by half, and that is principally because we didn't get a community infrastructure levy receipt during the year 22-23, and we only got a small amount of neighbourhood plan grant in 22-23 compared to the year previously, and there were other variations as well, and that's, you know, that kind of explanation goes down the other boxes. Staff costs increased because the clerk's hours went up. Also, the two salary awards for the clerk for 21-22 and 22-23 were both paid during 22-23, and then there's an additional fee for running the parish poll in February. Box 6, total other payments, went from 24,000 to 32,000, and that's because the outgoing council spent money on various items which are listed in that explanation. So that, if you're happy with that, if you've got any questions, please ask me. Otherwise, I'll ask you to approve that accounting statement. Any queries? Questions?
I haven't got a copy of it, so I can't.
Can I ask for your agreement then? As a proposal. Seconder. And votes for? Votes against? 0, 2 abstentions. Is that still guessing?
Because I haven't, yes, I can't see it.
So in doing that, county statements, you're approving of the statement and authorising the chair and herself to sign the return. So we'll go back. And then, I'll take in the order of the report's recommendations. Having approved those, can you agree that I should send the relevant documents to the external auditor? I've described the timescale. As I say, it has to be a period of 30 working days, which must include the first 10 working days of July. So I'm proposing to put the notices on the boards on the 1st of July and take them down at the end of 14th of August. So if you're happy with those as well, I take it that you are. And then finally on the accounts, or this section of the accounts, agenda item 7.1F, which is the asset register, which I've also got to send to the external auditor. Again, this is a weird table. I've never had a proper explanation of what and why, but what it lists is the kind of, the fixed assets held by the council, and what you're required to put down is their purchase value and their current value. However, there's no provision for depreciating things. I think I asked that question when I first started doing this job. What the current value tends to relate to increases in property value, i.e. Village Hall and Pavilion. The play area also, because every June, July, there's a play area consultant who inspects the play area in terms of safety and condition, but they also give a revised valuation for the equipment, and that goes into here as well. So the total at the bottom there on page 3, total of the purchase value, which is £217,847.50, that figure goes into, if you notice, goes into the accounting statement at the bottom of that table there, and that's what's required. I'm not sure it means anyone to very many people, but that's what you've got to do. And if there's any significant alteration, the external auditor will query it like they did last year. So can I ask you again to approve the asset register, or ask any questions first if you want. Questions? Proposal? Yeah. Set down.
Yep.
Agreed. Yep. Abstentions too. Yeah.
Somehow we store
Right, so just running down the recommendations. So council notes its accounting audits, its accounting procedures have been successfully internally audited. I think you've done that. The governance statement be approved, you've done that. And we be authorised to sign the return. Ditto for the accounting statement. That the documents be submitted to the external auditor in the appropriate timescale. That you've approved the asset register, and finally that you approve the proposals for providing publicity to the accounts. I think it's agreed. Thank you very much. Next one, again, sorry, financially, bank signatories. As I've mentioned, one of the internal auditor's comments were that he feels that there should be 4 councillors who can act as signatories, and that two should be required to authorise every payment. Payments, the majority of payments are done these days online, so what would happen is that the clerk sets up a payment via the bank website. It would notifications go to whichever two councillors are on the approved list. They will get an email saying please authorise this payment, and you have to tick a box on the website, and that then authorises the payment to go out. So what I need, if you're to go along with the internal auditor's recommendations, is to know which 4 councillors are to act as signatories. Please.
No objections, okay.
Sorry, I assume, yeah, that Ewan will be one. Sorry.
Yes.
Jane.
Yeah.
2.
I'll do if you want.
Can I have agreement to that? Just a show of hands. Everybody happy with that? Thank you. What I'll do, just to try and speed that as far as possible, I'm going on holiday on the 11th, next Sunday for a fortnight. I'd quite like to get that stuff kind of sent to the bank, as it were, via their website before I go. And what I need, I've obviously got the 4 people's names, phone numbers, addresses, email addresses. What I need are your dates of birth, and you also have to have a kind of a username. I don't know how it's used. It might come through in your. It might be something when you're asked to authorise a payment, you might have to put in your username there. I don't know. I've never actually seen that happen. So I just need a username. I know the previous chair had a slightly odd username, which I won't repeat. It can be any name. It doesn't need to be a name. It can just be just a word. It's just a word. So if you just think of that,
make a list at the end of that.
And if you can, make a list at the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you. 7.3 standing orders and direct debits. That's a list of the current ones. Can you, well, if you've got any questions, please ask me, but otherwise, can you approve them, please? I don't think it's anything unusual. I think you considered CPRE at the last meeting, actually, under a different report.
Yeah.
Any questions? Queries?
No.
Okay, can I ask for a show of hands on that as well, please? I won't bother asking for. Thank you. I think if it's something that's remotely controversial, then go through the proposal, a seconding thing. But if it's something fairly straightforward, I think a show of hands is sufficient. If obviously there's a 50-50 split or something, then it gets a bit more complicated. So that's agreed. 7.4, community infrastructure levy. I don't know if you're familiar with what that is, but these days when planning applications, for instance for housing, are approved, the developer has to pay a sum of money to the district council to help pay for social facilities, perhaps highway improvements that might or might not relate to the developments being proposed. And so if within the parish there are developments built, then the parish gets a cut of that. And we don't have any say in how much or what it is. So if there's a couple of houses built, which obviously have been dotted around the parish in the last few years, a few months later, once they start to construct them, we get a lump of money through. And that has to be used on, there are some constraints on how you can spend it, but essentially you can spend it on any kind of infrastructure thing, lighting on the village hall car park, as you see the list I've got in the report, council notice boards, doors for the pavilion, you can use it for any kind of thing like that. So a report has to go to Cheshire East once a year on how we spent the money. They want it by the end of the year, but I do it according to my timescale, and it's easy to do it at the end of the financial year. So you can see that in the years 2020 and 2021, we received £15,500 from 3 or 4 separate developments. Up to date, we've spent £5,500 of that. And what we have left, £10,000. It's earmarked by the outgoing council for certain things. £3,000 for expenditure on the neighbourhood plan, £3,000 on refurbishment of the play area, and £4,000 to spend on enhancing parish council assets, buildings or land. So there's an amount yet unspent of £10,000. So all I'm asking you to do is to ask any questions, but note that. And I'll send a copy on to Cheshire East. Okay. And then 7.5 is the monthly financial summary, which comes every month to the parish council. As it's the first time you've seen that table, I'll talk a little bit about it. There are 7 columns of figures. The first 3 are receipts. Obviously, the budget. What's in the budget? The budget was approved in December and was the basis for the precept demand. So the budget figure for the precept is 15,650. Adjoining that, you see we've had half of that. We get 50% of that in April, and then the other 50% in September. Then the third column is variance, so that's just subtracting the actual payment from the budgeted figure, and there's a percentage figure there which is really doesn't help at all. It can be very confusing. This table produced automatically by the software, so I wouldn't worry about the percentages. So you can look down the receipts. Obviously there haven't been very many so far, just the precept and a bit of village hall rental. And then the next three columns are payments, again budget, actual and variance, and you can see that under administration we spent £1,000 so far, village hall 500 and odd, a lot of which will be for oil, also cleaning the hall, obviously other things like that. Then a couple of smaller items down there. And the two items I've specifically mentioned are in the receipts column against donations and grants. There's a figure of £1,096.68. That matches with a figure at the bottom of payments in miscellaneous expenditure. And that is expenditure to purchase the 3 new village boundary signs which have been erected on the edges of the village. So those are the parish councils, but the Pickmere Community Group donated a sum to pay for those signs, and that's the donation there. And then so that gives the totals there, and then there's a couple of rows underneath showing, or there's a row showing VAT, and the first figure of VAT, 369.97, that's what has been refunded since the 1st of April, and the figure across from it, 285.45, is what VAT we've paid out and will be claimed in due course. Those figures never balance because it's always some in and some out, but I aim to apply for refunds of VAT every quarter, something like that. The council doesn't pay any VAT, it's not liable for VAT, so we claim VAT back whenever we pay a bill where it is included. So that's that table, and then the second sheet is the reserves balance. We had to do something like this, particularly when we got the large sums that we received in COVID years. So the big sums came from COVID grants because we had 2 business rated premises and we got substantial grants, and also from the community infrastructure levy. And then there were various other, there was also an existing part of the council's council financial resources which have also been earmarked, and the outgoing council has earmarked those sums for the categories on that reserves balance, and as it's spent over the year you'll see figures appearing in the spend column there, and so at the bottom of that table, in fact not the final column, the total funds available to the council currently $78,000 of that, about 18,500 are in the so-called general fund, and then the other 59,500 are the earmarked funds that the council is holding. In a sense, the objective, I think Chat would say, is that in the council's general fund it should hold about a precept's worth of cash in reserve in case you need to spend it on something that's unforeseen. But there are other bigger issues that might crop up. For instance, in that list of earmarked categories, there's 1,000 in there for unforeseen legal fees. We haven't paid any in the last few years, but you never know. There's a figure for unforeseen election costs, because if, for instance, 2 councillors resign in the year and the posts are advertised and more than 2 people apply for those 2 vacant posts, then there has to be an election. If there's an election, it has to be carried out by Cheshire East, and they charge the parish council for it. and that cost can be, it's always a guess because we've not actually had that situation, but it can be 2,000 or 3,000. So that's why there's a figure of 2,750 held in case that happens. And the other figure there, as I'd mentioned, is the IROS grass cutting contingency. As you may know, well, I think it was discussed at the last meeting, Steve Wilkinson cuts the main part of the grass at the IROS, and he does that voluntarily. We don't pay him except that the community group pay his expenses for diesel and whatever. So for the last few years we've held a figure in the reserves just in case there comes a year when Steve says he's had enough and he doesn't want to carry on doing that, and we have to go out and pay somebody to do that. So that's just been held there just in case. If it happened this year, then there's 2,000 there ready to pay a bill. I don't know how much a bill might be, but then in future years one would have to include a figure in the budget, in next year's budget, to cover that. So with that long introduction, is there any questions?
Is the general fund in a are there separate bank accounts here, or is it all just sitting in one account?
It's all in one account. It's all in one account, and again, it's the Scribe system. I was talking about Scribe. Scribe is the financial software. It's the financial software, the Scribe system, that produces the reserves balance calculation. So as long as when I'm entering a payment of an invoice, as long as I put it under the appropriate cost code, it would go either against one of the general fund cost codes or against one of the reserves cost codes, and Scribe keeps the balance. It was always, before we did that, well, it's something that Scribe actually introduced in the last 2 or 3 years, that facility. Before that, it was very difficult to kind of keep track of different kind of categories of expenditure you're spending, but it's easier now. So I can ask you to note that report now, please. Thank you. Finally, on the financial, I think. New payments between meetings. There are 3 new payments due, plus an additional one I'll explain. One is my fees, which are detailed on the second sheet there for the period 9th to the 30th of May. There's the fee for the cleaning of the hall. That is £84 for June. Usually, historically, we paid Nina in arrears, and she sends a bill at the end of the month. But because I knew we were going to a new council and it would take a time to get the new bank signatories, etc., sorted out, I asked her to bill us at the beginning of the month, which she's done. So she's leaving me an invoice for £84 for June, and then she's on holiday for 3 weeks, July into August. So I think I'll just ask her then to bill us for August at the end, bill us for July at the end of July. So the bills will come in later. So there's that additional figure of £84 for Nina, and also a figure of £60 for Cheshire Wildlife Trust in providing some high definition plans for the evidence for HS2. And then a fourth item where I've had an invoice in today from Chalk for a payment of £25 for an induction session for councillors and clerks, which Alison attended, so that's £25, and I'd recommend everybody goes on that course, please.
That's 2 for the price of 1.
Oh, of course, it's online, so you can all get together and do one course. You could. No, there is a budget. I wrote down where it was. There is a budget for councillor training and clerk training in the this year's budget, which is £200, I think, for councillors. So feel free to use it. I've sent to Ewan the full training programme for Chalk. So I can circulate that and see if people want to attend them. But the induction course you really should go on, I think. And then there are other courses about meetings and minutes and all sorts of stuff.
So the 200 is that in total, or?
That's 200 for councillor training in the budget,
Okay.
and I think it's 120 for clerk training.
Okay.
But you can via from one to the other if you need. So can I ask for approval of those payments, please? Great, thank you. Sorry, it's a bit of a monotony. The planning schedule, I've circulated the current list of current planning applications. There's one update on the list. I circulated the change of use of the 22/4823 change of use to garden at the Marl Pools. That's now been approved in the last few days. But otherwise, there are a couple there. I know one is not yet determined, but the others have all been determined, one way or the other. Any questions on those? Thank you.